Metroid Prime is a game that holds a unique space in my heart. It's a game that I stumbled upon at a crucial point in my development as a gamer, and it's a game that I hold a great deal of nostalgia for. So after hearing those words, it may come as a shock to you that until a few weeks ago, I've actually never finished Metroid Prime. I've never even played past the first 30 minutes. In fact, if we're being technical, I've actually never played the game at all.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Now, right now, from your perspective, I'm sure it looks like I'm experiencing what my therapist likes to refer to as cognitive dissonance. Because how the hell could I have nostalgia for a game I've never played? Well, give me a chance to explain and I promise that it'll all make sense in the end. Probably. When I was a kid, my parents weren't exactly head over heels about video games. They weren't banned from our home or anything, unless they were suggestive.
You've got a great butt.
Oh, I see. First it's my eyes, now it's my butt.
But they didn't do much to enable my two older brothers and I to play them. They were baby boomers, already drinking age when Pong was released. They mostly saw video games as a waste of time, and figured if they bought us a game console, then they would be on the hook for buying us games for it as well.
It may look like a harmless bagel toaster, but inside is a deadly donut.
So if we wanted a console, we were expected to buy it ourselves. My oldest brother managed to scrape up enough cash for an SNES, and later passed it down to the middle brother, who in turn saved up enough for a PlayStation, who would eventually pass both of them down to me. They didn't have many games though, and I was an 8-year-old noob, so I mostly wound up playing the first few levels of Super Mario World and Dino Crisis on repeat. I didn't give those systems the respect that they deserved, and they eventually died. Since I was too young to work, I never got in on the 6th generation, and would have to wait until the 7th generation to buy my first console. But for the time being, my first taste of video games had left me hopelessly addicted and itching for a fix wherever I could find one. This left me with 3 options. My friends, who understandably were not always keen to have me hog the controller for hours at a time, the arcade machines at the local pizza shop, and the holy grail of them all, the retail store game demo kiosks. I very clearly remember replaying the demos for Spider-Man 2, Super Mario Sunshine, Ratchet & Clank, and Pikmin ad nauseum. But none of those demos resonated with me stronger than Metroid Prime's at the GameCube kiosk. It's hard to describe, but there was just something that I found so captivating about Metroid Prime at the time. Samus didn't just use a gun like other shooter protagonists. She had a whole-ass laser cannon for an arm. When I figured out I could just transform into a sentient pinball at will, it blew my mind. And using different visors to scan alien technology to learn their motives and weaknesses? At the time, it just felt so different, so fresh, and as far as Nintendo exclusives went, so edgy. So you better believe me when I say that I replayed that demo to death whenever I walked in a store that had it on display. I didn't care if I was replaying the same 30 minutes over and over again because I had never played anything like it. And like I said earlier, I wasn't exactly in a position to be picky. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, I never got a GameCube and actually ended up skipping 4 console generations of Nintendo systems before finally getting a Switch in 2017. Since then, games like Hollow Knight, Ori and the Blind Forest, and Owlboy, which is criminally underrated by the way, have helped to secure the subgenre collectively known as Metroidvanias as one of my favorites, despite having never fully played through a Metroid or Castlevania game. I'm still catching up on classic Nintendo titles that I missed at release, and consequentially have been begging for a Metroid Prime port to the Switch every step of the way. Nintendo, please give me Wind Waker or Twilight Princess, I'm so hungry for more Zelda. Well, imagine my excitement a few weeks ago when I finally got my wish after all these years. Nintendo confirmed a long-brewing rumor by officially announcing Metroid Prime Remastered. And if that wasn't hype enough, those maniacs had the balls to release it that very same day. And wait, hold on, what's this? $40? $40! Okay, who are you and what have you done with Nintendo? So really, the question is, after all this time, can the 3D evolution of a series that birthed the genre hold a candle to its modern contemporaries? And will it hold up to the nostalgia of what I imagined this game to be based on my very limited experience all those years ago? Prime's intro is basically the demo 1-for-1. You touch down on a space frigate that serves as a tutorial to familiarize yourself with the basic mechanics. You know the drill, shoot some aliens, open some doors, hack some mainframes, and ball some balls? After a brief boss fight, an explosion overloads the ship's core and knocks you back, damaging your suit and stripping it of most of its powers. You have minutes to escape the ship before it self-destructs and make it out by the skin of your teeth. Meta Ridley, a cybernetic dragon thing? Metroid fans, feel free to chime in the comments and let me know who the hell Meta Ridley is. Also escapes in the nick of time and makes a descent towards the surface of a nearby planet, Talon 4, with us in hot pursuit. This officially marks the point where my experience with the game through the demo comes to an end, and everything from here on out was a 100% blind playthrough. But as soon as my ship touched down, I could already tell that this game was something special. Talon 4's overworld was quite literally dripping with atmosphere. I found myself amid drizzling rain, flowing waterfalls, and alien plant life adorning a lush rainforest. I stumbled upon ruined temple grounds built by an extinct tribe long forgotten that I would come to learn were known as the Chozo. Its stone walls bearing runes that recall a cataclysm that cursed this planet and foretell of a day when a heroine from the stars will arrive to cleanse it once and for all. As a first-time Metroid player, this was a completely different vibe than I had envisioned. From the outside looking in, I always thought that Metroid seemed a bit more hard sci-fi than your typical Nintendo franchise. But while this is absolutely a game where you use lasers to blow up robots, bugs, and aliens, this fantastical approach to world building strongly echoes The Legend of Zelda, and its unique blend of futurism with mysticism strikes a tone that I haven't experienced since I first stepped foot onto Installation 4 in Halo Combat Evolved. At this temple, you discover your main objective, to search the corners of the planet for 12 Chozo artifacts and use them to open a sealed impact crater that contains the source of Talon's corruption. Seems pretty straightforward on the surface, but this is a proper Metroidvania after all. You'll come to find that most of the paths before you are either inaccessible or inhospitable. Okay, there's a new door, nope, just out of reach. Well, this is an auspicious cave, I wonder what's down here. Nope. Too big to fit through this. Okay, maybe I'll just try going this way instead and hopefully— oh god damn it. This is the game's way of telling you that your priority number 1 is scouring Talon 4 to get back all those powers you lost and even some brand new tools to boot. And this is when Metroid Prime really starts to shine and pulls off one of the most exhilarating first acts of a video game that I've ever played. There's rarely ever a lull in these opening hours as your exploration is consistently rewarded with new weapons and suit upgrades what feels like every few minutes. And the satisfaction you gain from backtracking to open those previously locked paths is nothing short of addicting. Okay, now I have a double jump and can clear this gap with ease. Nice, this Varia suit upgrade means I'm safe from becoming a
crispy-ass critter.
Alright, now I can squeeze into these tight spaces with my signature morph ball. Oh, that's right, I get to talk about the morph ball, hell yeah. Okay, this feature's implementation feels like nothing short of a technical achievement for its time. With the push of a button, Samus seamlessly transitions between her first-person power suit form and her third-person morph ball form. There's something so immensely satisfying about curling up into this Tron bike hamster ball hybrid at a moment's notice. It's not just used for traversal either. Samus in her ball form can use bombs to blow up enemies and clear piles of rubble. It gets even more mileage solving various environmental puzzles, most of which I found clever enough to be engaging, but never obtuse enough to be frustrating. And it all handles like a dream, too. Its controls are intuitive, and much like the rest of this game, it has a real sense of momentum. And considering this game released during a time known for awkward third-person camera angles, the fact that the camera automatically tracks Samus's ball form while never going out of focus is kind of a miracle. Whether it's racing down tunnels, building speed on a half-pipe, or grinding these magnetic rails, the movement just looks and feels butter smooth. Not to mention that constructing these levels in a way that makes sense for both first and third-person perspectives is a testament to the level designer's flexibility. Speaking of level design, as you acquire more and more upgrades, Metroid Prime's world starts to open up into a network of catacombs, canyons, and complexes. Your journey through Talon 4 will take you across a variety of biomes, each filled with hazardous environments and hostile wildlife. Sacred ruins are overrun with venomous insects and poisonous ponds, subterranean caverns belching molten lava and fire-breathing serpents. Frozen ravines obscure secret laboratories where the main antagonistic force, the space pirates, conduct their twisted experiments. The sheer feeling of wonder that continuously washes over you in these opening hours as you discover new areas is beautifully humbling. And these areas are as vast as they are deep. Even if your sense of direction is usually on point, you are absolutely going to get lost at least a few times. I'm a big fan of 3D maps, and I think Metroid Prime's mostly hits the mark, but I wish that the map had the option to visually stack the worlds on top of each other so it was easier to see where their respective elevator shafts connected. Oh, and each of these worlds have their own soundtrack that perfectly accompanies their environments. Sparkling pianos and ethereal synths slowly swell into a triumphant chorus that fills the Talon jungles and perfectly encapsulates the spirit of adventure and discovery on an uncharted world. The subtle drones, pulsing signals, and echoing snares of the Chozo ruins add to the air of unsettling mystery that lures you forward to find what sinister secrets lie ahead. There's a lot of highlights we could talk about here, but my favorite track is easily the Phendrana Drifts theme. Those icy, slick keys layering on top of one another, the subtle jingling tambourine that almost sounds like sleigh bells, and the slowly rising ghostly choirs. It all just captures the winter essence so well. Seriously, the music in this game absolutely fucks, and reinforces that futuristic fantasy tone that I mentioned earlier by perfectly balancing space-age electronics with spiritual acoustics. Shooting does take a backseat to exploration and puzzle solving here, hence why the game has been described as not a first-person shooter, but a first-person adventure. But just because combat isn't the main course, that doesn't mean that it isn't a tasty side dish. You get 4 unique arm cannon beams. The default power beam fires basic energy projectiles. The wave beam can electrocute enemies and has a spread pattern that almost functions like a shotgun. The ice beam freezes enemies in place and leaves them vulnerable to being shattered by a follow-up missile. And the plasma beam is a powerful laser that also inflicts burn damage over time. While most encounters will let you play around with whatever combination of beams you prefer based on your playstyle, some enemies are resistant to all but one specific beam, which calls for a bit of tactical switching during firefights. Wait a second. 3D maps, first-person platforming, weapon swapping for specific enemies. You know, as I'm writing this, I'm starting to think that the Doom Eternal devs maybe copied some of Metroid Prime's homework. Anyway, enemies are varied enough to keep things fresh and are mostly memorable and fun to fight, with the exception of the Chozo ghosts. Every time I got locked in a room with a group of these guys, I just let out an audible groan. Character design and moveset-wise, they just feel too similar to the Space Pirates. The constant teleporting made them annoying to keep track of, even with the X-ray visor. And the song that loops during their encounters is the only piece of music in the game that I found to be downright annoying. Boss fights are a highlight here as well. They're just as varied as the base enemies, and the best ones expect you to fully take advantage of Samus's bag of tricks if you want to come out on top. The only boss I didn't really care for was Thardus. I don't know, maybe it's a skill issue on my part, but I felt like he had an unreasonable amount of health for a boss that early in the game. It wasn't a difficult fight by any means, but it definitely felt like a slog. Speaking of slog, I've been putting off this point of the review for as long as I can, but I can't ignore it anymore. Up until this point, you may have noticed that aside from a few nitpicks, I've basically had nothing but praise for Metroid Prime. Which is to be expected. This is one of the highest rated video games of all time, and it can't be for no reason. But for all of its strengths, this game does have an Achilles heel, and its name is pacing. Remember earlier when I said that its first act was a blast and that you're constantly finding new places and upgrades? Well, that's because this game is a little bit front-loaded. Metroid Prime took me about 15 hours to beat on regular difficulty, but within the first 8 hours, I had already been to every biome and acquired nearly every major upgrade. After that, the pace of exploration and item pickup slows down to a crawl, and the next 4 hours boil down to bouncing back and forth on the map until the last couple upgrades are acquired, while dealing with repetitive combat encounters and a somewhat jarring difficulty curve. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the game is too hard or anything, but considering this game was basically a breeze up until this point and combat was always fairly light, the sudden spike in the number of enemies and their damage output in late game just seemed to come out of nowhere. And then, when you're finally at what feels like the finale, you're hit with a reminder that you still have to go find the rest of those 12 artifacts they tasked you with at the beginning of the game. Now, maybe I was doing something wrong, but due to a combination of progress gating and some obscure placements, I had only found 5 of the 12 artifacts at this point, and had to spend the next 2 hours checking every corner of the map to track down the last few. This could have easily been alleviated by introducing a fast travel system once all your abilities had been obtained, or just more evenly gating access to the artifacts across early and mid-game. But as it stands, Metroid Prime's final act is a bit padded, and I feel like this game would have been perfection if it were just a few hours shorter. Fortunately enough, it does conclude on a strong note with the 2 best boss fights in the game that I won't spoil for you. Alright, now that I've covered my thoughts on the game, the burning question still remains. Is Metroid Prime the epic sci-fi adventure that I imagined it would be all those years ago? And the answer is absolutely, with a few caveats. Let's not mince words, this is an amazing game. The atmosphere, the music, the world building, the level design, the blend of unique mechanics is all top notch. For most of its runtime, I would say it actually exceeded my expectations, and had me immersed in ways that I was not anticipating. But I couldn't help but feel that the game showed all of its cards 2/3 of the way through. To be fair, there's more creativity and fun to be had in those first 2/3 than most devs could hope to fit into their entire game, but spreading out progression a bit more evenly or just keeping it short and sweet could have kept this ball from losing some momentum. Even taking its pacing issues into account, Metroid Prime still holds one of the most thrilling adventures that video games have to offer. The risks that Retro Studio took in adapting a 2D side-scroller series into a first-person shooter paid off in spades. Hollow Knight might still take the crown as my favorite Metroidvania of all time, but this easily clears as one of the best of the genre, one of my favorite Nintendo titles, and has me sufficiently hungry for more Metroid. So if you're a Metroid fan and you've made it this far, do me a favor and let me know in the comments what entry in the series I should play next. I think the highest praise that I could give this game is that it joins the ranks among God of War 2018 and Resident Evil 4 as a rare game that succeeds at radically evolving their respective series while preserving its soul and fundamentals. Now, speaking of Resident Evil 4, where's everybody going? Bingo?